Have you ever heard Dennis Priebe speak against abortion? Well, if you have not, then you are about to find out the reason why, and you probably won't like what you hear. Just a few minutes ago, someone in California called me and told me about a message being preached by Priebe, a speaker for Amazing Facts. The message is titled The Trojan Horse, and if you go online right now and search Dennis Priebe Trojan Horse, you will see that he is preaching this message everywhere he is scheduled to speak, and as you can see right here on his website, this man is speaking in a different location every week, so apparently a very popular speaker. Thankfully, Mr. Priebe has published his sermon online right here so that you can read it without having to watch the video, and if you do watch the video, you'll see that he just reads from it almost verbatim. If you think that this man's messages are based on the scripture, then you are in for a real shock. Dennis Priebe teaches that abortion is a matter of religious liberty, just like the Sabbath. And because the evangelicals and Catholics speak so strongly for the Sixth Commandment, because they speak so strongly against killing children, then we should avoid saying anything against abortion, because fear porn, the Catholics and evangelicals will use this to form an image to the beast and bring in the Sunday law. This is not some random person in the weird part of the internet. This is Dennis Priebe from Amazing Facts preaching this every week. He begins his message telling the story of the Trojan horse, then he moves into the errors of the evangelical gospel and how the evangelical movement got involved in politics. He then says that since Adventists share many concerns and agree with evangelicals on many points, we are unfortunately in great danger of the Trojan horse of conservative religion and politics. Notice the word, invading our minds and our churches. If only we would have followed Ellen White's wise, inspired counsel to bury what? Political questions. We might not have opened the doors of the Trojan horse so widely. So very scary words, dangerous, invading, getting into politics, and guess which issue he brings up?
Suddenly a new issue took center stage in the religious evangelical alliance with politics. It was called abortion.
First of all, an issue can be both moral and political, but whether something is political or not should never change the Christian witness on its morality. And second, so what? A group of people don't want the murder of children to be legalized. So what?
I'm talking here about how abortion has become a political issue.
No, he's not. That's not true. He will imply that this is a religious issue, but even if it were a political issue, so what? Slavery was a political issue, and it was so political it divided the entire nation and led to an extremely bloody civil war. Yet Adventist pioneers did not hesitate at all to speak against slavery because it was political, and he himself notes that right here. Furthermore, the Sabbath will one day become even more political than abortion will ever be. Are we supposed to stop preaching the fourth commandment simply because it becomes political?
Even Christianity Today, which is an evangelical magazine, refused to call abortion sinful. That's 1968.
Just notice the irony. Here we have a Seventh-day Adventist pointing at evangelicals saying in 1968 they did not call abortion sinful, where we Adventists have been supporting it for over 49 years and we've never called it sinful. While it is true that many Christians, not all, definitely not all, but many Christians did in fact support the liberalizing of abortion laws in the 1960s to allow for a few exceptions, but as soon as they saw that these exceptions only served as loopholes for abortion on demand, they immediately changed their position. He says they didn't call it sinful in 1968, but he doesn't mention that just 2 years later in 1970, they did so, and here's a direct quote from the archive. Abortion on demand is nothing less than murder. The fact that abortion may be approved by law is not the question. We are talking here about the rightness or wrongness of the act in the sight of God. And when you read this next quote, think about Adventists. It is more than passing strange that some who mobilized to stop killing on the battlefield are among the chief proponents of abortion, and that some of the strongest opponents of capital punishment favor unrestricted abortion. That's Adventists. We will not fight in a war, and we won't support the death penalty, but we openly support and even practice the killing of children. We are asking whether individual Christians, as members of Caesar's kingdom as well as God's kingdom, have a responsibility. Here we must argue vehemently that they do! Exclamation point. Do you recognize the wording of that argument? That is almost almost exactly the same argument, an example given by A.T. Jones in 1888 when he argued against the Sunday law. He said this: "Suppose that someone wants to take the life of one of his fellow men and offer it as a human sacrifice. The civil government exists for the protection of life, liberty, property, etc., and it must punish that man for his attempt upon the life of his fellow man. I repeat, the question of religion is not considered by the state. The sole question is, did he threaten the life of his fellow man? Civil government must protect its citizens. This is strictly within Caesar's jurisdiction. It comes within the line of duties which the scripture shows to pertain to our neighbor, and with it Caesar has to do." When I started reading this paragraph right here, I was like, this seems really familiar. Where have I seen this before? Do you recognize where it's from? Let's continue. He says Catholics and evangelicals refused to vote for people who supported killing children. They, quote, believed that morality like killing children can and should be a matter for political legislation. The Adventist Church right now openly urges the government to make gambling illegal. Are we now Catholics because we do that? Adventists join other religious and secular organizations to influence who? To influence civil authorities to cease slavery. Does that now make us evangelicals? The church urges laws prohibiting smoking and urges anti-smoking legislation to protect unborn children. Does this now make us a bunch of compromised, brainwashed dupes of some undercover Jesuit Illuminati infiltrators?
In 1971, delegates to the Southern Baptist Convention allowed abortion under certain defined circumstances, which they reaffirmed again in 1974 and 1976. But in 1979, opposition to abortion became a rallying cry for evangelicals.
Did you see what he did there? He condemns the Baptists for softening their stance for just a few exceptions when we Adventists did the exact same thing. And what's worse, the Baptists realized their error and changed, but we Adventists continued until today to support the same thing. Yet who is Dennis Priebe bad-mouthing? He is bad-mouthing the Baptists. And are we to assume that Dennis Priebe is such a good student of history that he knows that Baptists accepted abortion in what year? 1971, for a few exceptions. Yet somehow magically and mysteriously, he is totally ignorant that his very own church both accepted abortion at the very same time and that continues until today to support these very same exceptions. Again and again and again and again, we Adventists have no problem publicly condemning everyone else, but when we do the exact same thing, we get a pass. Oh, just look the other way. Move along. Nothing to see here. Oh, don't pay attention to that.
I want to make it very clear that Adventism is opposed to abortion on demand as a method of birth control. We are totally opposed to that.
No, that is not true. If I was in that audience when Dennis Priebe said that, I would have immediately raised my hand and stood up and said, "Excuse me, what about our own official public position? And what about Edward Allred? We Adventists honor and celebrate the most notorious abortionist who boasted of killing hundreds of thousands of children specifically for birth control. And what about our own church president, Neil Wilson? He told the International Religious News Service that we Adventists support abortion for birth control to decrease the population. Furthermore, it is a fact published right here in our own official church position that we do support abortion for a woman's, quote, health, rape, incest, and handicapped children. We do not oppose that. And even if we did oppose abortion for, quote, birth control, we still support it for other reasons, which are all still wrong. And the Mother's Health Clause right here is the exact same clause used for justifying what? Abortion for birth control. I wish so much that I could have been there, and I wish so much that we could have got his reaction on video, because that would be something worth watching.
In 1984, a New York governor said,
and look at this quote right here. I read, in 1984, a New York governor said, and I was like, stop right there. Where have I seen that quote? Oh, that's right. That's the exact same quote that Kevin Paulson likes to use. Dennis Priebe is quoting almost verbatim from the arguments of Kevin Paulson. Now that Dennis Priebe has got everyone all pumped up on suspicion, he says right here, make no mistake, the use of civil power by apostate Christianity is making coercion a substitute for conversion and will lead directly to the formation of the what? Of the image to the beast.
Is making coercion a substitute for conversion. and will lead directly to the formation of the image to the beast.
You know, I can't believe that I have to say this, but the image to the beast is a matter of worship. That's what Adventists have always taught. It's all about worship. Gambling, smoking prohibition, alcohol and temperance, killing children by abortion, slavery. These are not matters of worship.
About this extremely dangerous thing that is happening in Adventism.
This is textbook, classic, unscriptural, non-biblical, nonsensical fear porn. The only reason to link abortion to the image to the beast is based on the belief that killing children is a matter of religious liberty, and therefore we should not say anything. It's based on the belief that abortion is just as much a matter of freedom of conscience as is keeping the Sabbath.
And will lead directly to the formation of the image to the beast.
Please take a moment to appreciate what is going on here. Dennis Priebe from Amazing Facts is standing in Adventist churches on Sabbath morning in the pulpit, filling everyone's mind with the idea that violently attacking and killing a child is a matter of religious worship, and we should be afraid of any other Christians who actually have the courage to stand up and speak against that. Let Dennis Priebe serve as a lesson for everyone watching this video that both liberals and conservatives in our church have accepted the idea that abortion is a matter of religious worship. The brainwashing of Adventists is far more extensive than you think, and I'll bet that many people watching this video would never dream that Priebe could be so messed up standing there saying these things, but that's what the abortion issue is doing. It's drawing all of this nonsense out of everyone.
It would be well for us to remind ourselves that religious liberty means two different things for Adventists and for evangelicals.
Oh, that's right. He's correct, because evangelicals are not brainwashed to believe that killing children is a matter of freedom of conscience. They may be wrong on other points, but they are not wrong on abortion.
Well, this is the Trojan horse that is fascinating Adventism right now. And we allow it in our midst at the peril of our reason for existence.
This is the Trojan horse that is fascinating Adventism right now, and we allow it in our midst at the peril of what?
Peril of our reason for existence.
I mean, wow, that's really some X-rated fear porn right there.
And I say how tragic it is that evangelical theology has penetrated so deeply into Adventist theology that we are actually promoting it at the highest scholarly levels. And we are marginalizing the beliefs of those who believe in genuine Adventism. We're calling them fanatics and fringe groups.
Do you see what he is doing right there? As more scholars come out like Hassel, Dupre, Gain, Moscala, Tornalejo, Davidson, and others, as they continue to come out and condemn abortion, Dennis Priebe and others are trying to frame the issue to make it look like these scholars, are dupes of evangelical compromise, while he paints himself as a genuine Adventist.
Can we really trust and ally with a movement because it supports a few strands of truth?
That is a very misleading question. We do not have to have an alliance with anyone to give moral clarity. We do not have to have an alliance with Seventh-day Baptists in order to preach about the Sabbath. We can speak against moral evils without joining other churches, and Ellen White's support of the temperance work is a perfect example of that. And also notice this: why is it that when scholars in our church condemn abortion, they write detailed research papers citing all sorts of Greek and Hebrew? They base their arguments in the biblical text. But when we hear all of this fear porn, they either don't cite any sources, or the sources that they do cite are not from the text. Do you notice that? And I saved the very best for last. Check this out right here.
We desperately need to return to our Adventist pioneers who refused to get involved in party politics. They stood, yes, they stood for moral issues like temperance and religious liberty. They did oppose errors in society like slavery, even defying immoral laws like the Fugitive Slave Act.
James White, Uriah Smith, J.N. Andrews, J.H. Kellogg, Kate Lindsay, J.W. Wagner, E.J. Wagner, A.T. Jones, Horatio Lake, and other Adventist pioneers unanimously defined the unborn as living human children. They condemned abortion as a violation of the Sixth Commandment. They condemned other Protestants for supporting abortion. They published anti-abortion sermons by non-Adventists in our own journals, and they showed open support and sympathy for anti-abortion legislation because it was the right thing to do. According to these arguments by Dennis Priebe, Ellen White was surrounded by all of these voices supposedly teaching a great error and yet amazingly, this is absolutely amazing, she remained completely silent about it. According to Priebe,
this is the Trojan horse. This is the Trojan horse.
This is the Trojan horse that imperils the very reason for our existence. Yet amazingly, this same error had poisoned the minds of all of our Adventist pioneers, and Ellen White didn't say a word. This, of course, begs lots of questions, but especially two. If this is the Trojan horse, then how can Dennis Priebe see what Ellen White never saw? Is Dennis Priebe, like Kevin Paulson, more inspired than Ellen White? And if this is truly the Trojan horse, then why in the world do we need to desperately return to our Adventist pioneers who were themselves victims or even willing participants in this terrible deception?